With the recent changes that have taken place in Washington, is there a risk that the U.S. could be, by intent or unwittingly, going into a confrontation with Iran that could have devastating consequences down the road? And if you look back to your own legacy with regard to what happened with Iraq and the lessons we have learned from it and not learned from it, what would you say would be some important checks and balances that could be brought into play to prevent such a confrontation?
Yeah, well, the new incoming Secretary of State, assuming he's confirmed, has been on the record as being an opponent of the Iran nuclear deal. He's much more in line with Trump on that regard than the outgoing Secretary of State. The Iran nuclear deal may not have been perfect. It may not have been as good a deal as someone like James Baker or Brent Scowcroft might have been able to negotiate, but it still took a problem off the table. It took the problem of Iran's expanding nuclear program off the table for 3/4 of a decade. And in that time frame, a lot can happen inside Iran in the region. So it's not the greatest deal in the world, but it's a good in and of itself, essentially, and worth preserving. If the Trump administration continues to erode it and continually to beat up on it and beat it down, that's going to lead to greater tension between the U.S. and Iran in the Middle East. And the Europeans are not going to be on our side, by the way, on this. They really aren't, because one of the strengths, the accomplishments of the Iran nuclear deal was it held the alliance together. People forget this. This was a great accomplishment. It held the alliance together. So, and I think us competing with Iran militarily in the Middle East will be a loser. That the Iranians have cultural, other advantages that we don't have. They can play hard in a way we would not dare to play. They can do things. The Iranians are not staying up at night worrying that civilians were killed by Bashar al-Assad's bombs in Ghouta, or that there's mass starvation in Yemen where they're actively. That doesn't upset them. That's not how they operate. So they have real advantages, and I think the best policy towards Iran is one, and remember, we had so much trouble with Iraq, and Iraq was always a weaker, less impressive state than Iran, always, extremely. What we should do is maintain the nuclear deal and have a policy of containment in Iran, and wait for the day, and it will come, where there will be a regime amelioration, regime shift, because Iran is not a complete authoritarian state. It's a weird mix. It's an authoritarian state generally, but with democratic elements inside of it. Periodic demonstrations against the regime, periodic elections, so that a system like that doesn't stay static. It's inherently unstable. And it may be that the current supreme leader may be the last person to occupy that position. That position may actually be eliminated after Ali Khamenei passes from the scene. So I think it's in our best interest to play a game of waiting containment with Iran.